All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this Assembly Committee on Homelessness to order. Thank you. Sure. All right. So let's go ahead and start with introductions, starting with Mr. Prince.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Felix Brown.
Pete Peterson.
Austin Quinn Davidson. Debbie Curley, Fanny Elizabeth Curley.
Dean Gates and the council.
Nancy Burke with the administration.
All right. Then, before we get into business, just want to go over the agenda really quick. We will be beginning with a mayor's report before we move on to the report on zone abatement. And then we will be reviewing 2019 budget proposals and some different funding scenarios regarding homelessness. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Burke.
Thank you. We have a few things to report out on, so we have a few slides here for the committee. Starting with just a reminder that the plan was released, and there's specific areas for focus for each of the planning partners, and you see our other partners here in the room with us, and that will be how this will roll out. That there's there's overlap in our areas, there's recommendations and ideas that will cross pillars, and so the core planning team will make every effort to support each other as we do events and meetings. So that won't always happen, that we'll all be in the room, but today it is, so it's great. The public health and safety community priorities, these are from the plan, in the order that are listed here: address encampments, provide housing and supports, and increase public safety in a number of different ways. And then the last piece is empower the community through engagement, dialogue, and public forums. We'll be looking for ways to continue that as we gather input on the plan. Just a reminder that under that public safety pillar, there is a section that has a number of recommendations that are will take us many years or many months to accomplish, and so we will have to prioritize in some way. So providing input and continuing to dialogue around that will be important as we go forward. So this year, looking at the priorities in the Anchored Home Plan and what came through the public process and input, reinforced some of the activities, most of the activities that the Housing and Homeless Services Coordination Initiative has been working on over the past 3 years. And we've talked a lot in this committee about the need for emergency shelter and how to get our minds around how many people need emergency shelter. We've talked about transitional and other housing options. Public safety has been raised by the community, and a conversation of the last several committee meetings and ongoing dialogue as we've been working across the last 3 years. And out of that has come some new ideas around camp abatements and removing camps and what we may do. There are also programs that are rolling through for housing and behavioral health support, and so this is just a reminder that the work will continue, and it will in fact be bolstered by having the strategic action plan. Camp abatement process, we have some updates. You may have seen the report. There was a KTVA story last night. We finished the 30-day wait period on the 72-hour abatement process that we ran. Just a reminder that there are a number of tools now that the municipality has conducted trials of this summer. The first one being focusing on areas of cleaning, and this was moving from more of a kind of a scattered approach of addressing camps as a more responsive model to focusing on certain areas that we know were more heavily impacted. And as we saw that this summer, we rolled through a number of the green belts through June and July. And the story map that's out on the municipality's GIS website has pictures and information about that process. We really encourage everyone to look at that. The zone abatement was in that that story map report as well, and that information about how that process rolled out. And the 72-hour posting is something that Rosa's going to give us a few minutes on. And then we, just to highlight that the prioritization, there have been questions around how does this happen? How does the prioritization happen? And it's really a function of several factors that go into deciding where to move next. The police, Parks and Rec, and the administration are meeting regularly during the summer, weekly, sometimes twice a week, to look at high volume areas or areas near schools or public safety concerns. And that's really guided by the different agencies that have expertise in those areas. And so that's information about how we prioritize. So I'm going to turn it over to Rosa for a moment to just give us an outline on how both the zone and the 72-hour posting process went.
Thank you, Ms. Rick. Just really quickly, I want to note for the record that we've been joined by Ms. Rose and that two of our committee members aren't here today, Mr. Constant and Mr. Dunbar. Both are traveling. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a little packet here so everybody can see kind of some of the administrative paperwork that went into both the zone trial and the 72-hour trial. You'll see that there is a log for the mobile intervention team, APD, as well as Parks and Rec. As you go further into the packet, there is the notice of zone campsite abatement, the notice here that we utilized for the zone. The zone trial went rather well. No new camps moved in, so we didn't get to practice storage on the 10-day zone abatement, which is why we decided to go ahead and move over to the 72-hour. I did notice, sorry, real quick, the zone abatement, I did notice the local community councils as well as the assembly members that were within that zone trial, the date that it was posted. Since we didn't get to practice storage, though, we decided to try on the 72-hour 3-day posting, which you can find in the packet. And this was the sign that we posted within that area. And then I had each individual who was in the camp that decided to store personal belongings fill out a form that stated that they understood that they were having their personal belongings stored and that they had been given a handout, which you'll find in the packet as well, as to where their items are being stored and how they can retrieve it and how to get a hold of me to set up a time to pick up their personal belongings. If they refuse to store their personal belongings, I had them fill out that form as well on site. And then upon picking up, retrieving their personal belongings, I had them also sign a document saying, acknowledging that they picked up their personal belongings, they've taken what they've liked, and the rest could be disposed of if they decided they didn't want to take everything. And then there was just kind of a little method that I used, just a little Excel spreadsheet, kind of just IDing everything, date in, the trash ID. We utilized solid waste services trash bins for storage, and all of those have an ID on it, so we utilized that and then just associated it with the person whose belongings it was. And then I just, when they made an appointment to come pick up their belongings, I set up a time and went over there and allowed them to grab their belongings, making sure that it was the same person who checked in their belongings. It was a little cumbersome. It was a lot of administrative work, and there was a lot of back and forth, but it worked out. 4 out of the 6 folks who stored personal belongings came to retrieve some of their items. And as you saw, yesterday was the tides up, and we disposed of the rest that was made.
Thank you. Just for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Weddleton. And he also has a question.
There was a lot of back and forth. What does that mean? What kind of discussion?
Just as far as, you know, when somebody would call and want to pick up their personal belongings, we'd have to set up a time that worked for both them and I, and then have to drive to the solid waste services and meet them at a certain time and wait for them to show and then give them their personal belongings. So it was just a little little bit much on my plate, but it worked out.
So the scheduling, but when they came, they said, oh, this is my stuff, I'm good?
Well,
or
we
did
knew,
they-
yes, we ID'd them. You know, I made sure that their ID matched the name of the person, that they made sure that they were truly the same people. And then I went into got their bins, and then they grabbed their things.
There was nothing like, hey, what about my gold watch and my wallet full of $1,000?
No, they knew what they checked in, and yeah, we had it well organized. So everything was just really, like I said, I would take their ID, their name, and I'd attach it to the SWS container ID that was on there. And then with all the paperwork that I had, we just, we made sure it was the person's belongings. So.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. LaFrance and Ms. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question has mostly been answered, but I was curious as to any feedback you got from folks in this process.
So they were actually really grateful to have their items stored. It seemed to me that it was a lot of things that they would actually need, clothes, blankets, things of that nature. So they were just grateful that they were able to retrieve their things. So they didn't have to try and reestablish, for like their clothes and things like that.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. Ms. Rose.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if all the people had IDs and how that worked. If they didn't have an ID, how would you take care of that problem?
Right, yeah, they actually did all have IDs. When they don't have IDs, we actually refer them to the mobile intervention team to help them get an ID. So.
Before or after?
Well, if they would have showed up without an ID, I would definitely have made that referral right then and there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Question, so 4 out of 6 individuals picked up their items. What are happening to the other 2? How long are we storing them? What happens after?
The 30-day, they were noticed on September 21st that the deadline was October 21st. That happened to be a Sunday. So we gave them an extra day, actually a day and a half. And I also reached out to them because I happened to, if they had a cell phone, I reached out to them and let them know that the deadline was coming up. So, and they understood that. Also, just a reminder, they did sign that sheet of paper that said, that they understood this process. So.
Sure. Ms. Rose.
Do they get an extension if they ask for one?
In code, they have 30 days from
Okay.
the date, so we just stuck with code.
Okay.
I don't know of any extension in the code. So. Yeah, nobody asked for it.
Thank you.
Okay, so a few more update items. Under public health and safety, we've talked a lot about establishing a standardized process for overflow shelter when the main shelters are full. That was reinforced in the public input and the process for updating the strategic plan. Establish a method for assessing shelter capacity each night during the winter. This is something that's in progress and an active conversation between the Brother Francis Shelter, Beans Cafe, the mobile intervention team about how we may identify when we're turning people away, tracking where they go. Those pieces are not all connected right now by information. So we're trying to get more of a live feed, if you will, of who's the status of the shelters and when they're full, so that overflow can be gauged in a much more standardized way. So these are in process this year. Last year we laid the groundwork for this, and there's a lot of work that will produce great results this year around this area. Just as a reminder, these are our counts. These 2 counts are separate processes. So the winter point in time is a HUD methodology. This is the way that our numbers have trended over the past 2 years, and then our summer count has the methodology that was conducted for these 2 years in a similar way. So while these 2 seasons don't compare to each other, the 2 years of each season do compare to each other. And this is something that we talked about with the committee, but it's good to remind ourselves that as we're talking about everything, when we talk about overflow shelter, when we talk about housing programs, different people have different levels of needs and are able to access resources in varying ways or with varying ease. And so we would expect that some of the people who have higher mental illness, higher addictions and medical issues are going to struggle with shelter that's in a congregate area that's a lot of people. You'll oftentimes hear people say, it's too congested, I can't go there. So as we think about interventions and we think about ways to steer people to emergency services and housing, we think of them generally in these categories. This isn't to say that someone who maybe scores high on our scale here wouldn't want the opportunity and do well in a lower level intervention. We need to try those when those are the options that we have available, but knowing that we may need to structure it a little differently. And in fact, sometimes people with very high needs will show low on our scale initially until confirmation happens, because a lot of people who are mentally ill don't do well on self-report measures. They don't report their illness in the way that maybe everybody else experiences it. So this is where one of the main housing projects that's happening for the adult system is moving forward. The Pay for Success project will begin enrolling people and ramping up here in the next couple of months. As a reminder, this is a project that's targeting people who have the overlap of homelessness, mental health or behavioral health, addiction issues, and medical problems. So these are the folks who are the oftentimes the high utilizers and in and out of jail and in camps primarily. So this is an intervention that will be focusing on them. This is our ramp-up timeline for this project. Just as a reminder, there are some new members on the committee that this project has a target of 270 people over the next 4 years. We kick off the pilot year in January of 2019. The official start of the project with all of the agreements in place will be January of 2020. However, we will be practicing as we go. We'll be piloting and ramping up beginning here shortly. This is just a listing of some of the projects that are out in the community right now, the work that we have to do under the crossover of our housing and supports pillar and the health and the public health and safety pillar is to ensure that as we're getting a better count of people who are in the community and their level of need, that we have options available in each of these need level of housing interventions. So we would have rapid rehousing for people. This is a model that just basically gets people back out to community, deals with more of the economic side of homelessness. As you move into people with more needs around treatment, mental health treatment or substance use treatment, you would move into a rapid rehousing with additional support, perhaps additional time, and so that would kind of be a mid-category for support. And then permanent supported housing are those people that the Pay for Success HUD project will target around very high needs. This is an example of how we'll be thinking about things. This is just a reminder, this is for the adult system. The youth are represented in this housing assessment, and we do see youth out in the unsheltered population. We see fewer of them in our shelters aside from the Covenant House shelter. That's another, just as an aside, that's another area of focus for the teams this winter, is working with youth that are aging out of Covenant House's system to try to help them bridge into the adult system and receive the support that they need to continue to seek services and not fall off of our radar.
All right, thank you, Ms. Burke, and thank you for that update on the Pay for Success. I get a lot of questions on 2 other projects, and if you have any updates, we'd like to hear them. First is the Path to Independence project, and then the second is the Youth Homelessness Demonstration project.
I would like to ask those programs to come in and present to the committee. I know that they are both actively enrolling, but I'm not able to address specifics about that. We can certainly ask for an update in writing before the next meeting as well.
Great.
I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Ms. Rose.
You mentioned that there were youth that were aging out of the Covenant House system. And what age group does that represent, and how many people are we talking?
The age group would be people who are, depending on which service, 21 to 24 is the group that's transitioning. And the number, I would see if Jasmine might have confidence in the number of that they're targeting radiation.
It just depends on the project. So essentially, some of the service providers are limited to only serving youth under the age of 18. Some have that 21 cap that Nancy mentioned, some have 24. So it depends on the service provider and their contract and their grant. But generally speaking, it's that 18 to 24 age group. I'm not sure the number of people that impacts at this moment.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Just for the record, that was Jasmine Kahn.
We have one additional update, and Natasha Pineda's here, and can give us some information about overflow shelter. Actually, I'm going to move up here.
Sorry. Just like to make a big entrance.
I just wanted to give you guys an update. We, as you guys know, you allocated some resources for overflow sheltering last year for this year's budget. We currently have a solicitation out to bid related to those services, but in the interim, we've been using the Safety Center as an overflow shelter for those who need sheltering. So I just wanted to give you guys a sense of where the status on that is. In the month of October, we only had 15 people access the overflow sheltering from Brother Francis Shelter due to their not having space. The largest volume of people who are staying at the Safety Center in the overflow sheltering are actually people who came in as Title 47 holds and are opting to stay there afterwards. We continue to see a significant decline in the seasonal intakes related to Title 47, and we've got historical year-over-year data, and we've been seeing those numbers go down. But it seems that the chronic alcohol or alcohol users that are coming into the Safety Center under the Title 47 are really the ones that are going to continue to need sheltering options and services as we look at putting that service out to bid. The solicitation closes tomorrow, and we anticipate having a vendor or service provider in place by November, with hopes to get services open. Sometime they have to put hiring together and all that. We think that'll be in place in November. We are basing the bid on the service need that we had last year. And so we will see at the end of this season. It's been unusually warm, so I think that's been a benefit for the Safety Center. So we haven't been at capacity at any point yet. We think that will change pretty rapidly. So we hope to have that service in place quickly. We believe the providers are working together on a plan, and we'll be responding to that bid. And then we will base next year's, we will get a contract out much sooner next year, and we will base that again on the experience of this current year's shelter needs.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Ms. Rose and Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you. You mentioned that there were 15 people who utilized the overflow. From that 15 people, do you expect a change throughout the year, or is that just seasonally? And then from the overflow that you mentioned, the Safety Center, where is that?
The Safety Center is in the correction. I always say this wrong. It's basically in the correctional facility. It's got a separate entrance and access point, but it's in that same complex.
So is that down the street from Brother?
It is.
Okay.
Yep, and it's not a permanent solution for overflow cold weather temporary sheltering. It's just that's what we had to offer this year in the interim before we got
That's
a bid
year
out.
round.
It is not. It is only when we enter into, I believe, 45 degrees.
45,
in the
right.
evenings. And I should correct myself. The 15 were from Brother Francis Shelter. We had one walk-in. So we had a total of 16 that didn't come in through the Title 47 entry point. We think that number will change. Sometimes those could be duplicate numbers, but they may not be. And we would anticipate last year we served up to 85 in the overflow sheltering at the coldest months. So we anticipate that again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What's the capacity of the Safety Center? And then also,
It's a trick question.
what's that?
So that's a trick
It's your question? And then, Could you explain a little about Title 47 and what that means?
I am actually not able to speak to exactly what Title 47 is, but Steve Ashman could probably speak to it better. The capacity at the safety center just recently changed. So I believe, can you correct, it was 112. That was what we were approved for, that was what was, but we are now at, I believe, 50 temporarily.
50 temporarily.
But as an interim, but we are going to be down, that space will only be approved for, I believe, 40 to 45. We're still working with the fire marshal to ensure that we're meeting code and that we're managing that site properly, but it'll be down to 45, I think, at the time. Do you guys, we can send you like the overall on what Title 47 is, but I don't want to speak to it, it's not my.
Are you looking for the definition?
Yeah, just what it is and what we do. And I think
Yeah,
it's
Title
overview.
47, it's Title 47 of Alaska statutes for people that are intoxicated in public and that are harmed to themselves or other because of their either intoxication or drugs. They can be temporarily placed in the Anchorage Safety Center for up to 12 hours. Section of
I have a
themselves.
question.
And so while we're operating the temporary overflow shelter in that facility, we are offering those folks who come in through that the option to stay until this temporary shelter is closed, which is at, I think, 6 a.m.
That's correct. Under the cold weather
Yeah.
plan, it automatically activates when it's 45 degrees or less. They are part of the cold weather shelter, and they ask individuals whether or not they choose to leave or would like to remain and stay warm.
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. Mr. Weddleton and Ms. Rose.
Wait, sorry, I was unclear on what is your RFP for?
We have a solicitation out to bid to provide cold temporary overflow sheltering. So right now we're hosting that temporarily with our contract with Securitas, which we appreciate them expanding that service to us in the period before we have an actual contract in place with a provider to do it. Last year, Securitas operated overflow sheltering at at Beans Cafe in a contract. So this year we're actually we put it out as a solicitation to bid to the providers.
So it's basically to replace the Beach Cafe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Rose.
Yes, thank you. What kind of services are provided at that safety center? Are there restrooms? Is there a place to wash up? And you mentioned that the Title 47, it was for people who are inebriated. Is that people who choose to be there, or are they forced to be there?
Just so it's the accurate answer the first time.
Thank you.
Under Title 47, individuals that are intoxicated to the point that they're harmed to themselves or other are involuntarily placed there until they sober up. Under the law, we can't keep them over 12 hours. So once they become sober and able to function, that they're released. If after 12 hours they still show signs of some type of intoxication, then the fire department's called and they're transported over to the fire department because obviously there's something else wrong. I might also add that during that stay there's checks, there's staffed by EMTs, and every 30 minutes, everybody in that place is checked for health and safety.
30 minutes?
Every 30 minutes.
Even if they're asleep?
Even when they're asleep, of course, sure. Make sure that they're still breathing, and if not, and if need be, they'll turn people over and things to make sure that their airways are clear.
Okay, thank you.
And it's we don't provide extensive services. It's a life and death service to ensure that they stay alive and make them safe.
Do they have beds? Do they have
They have
toilets?
mats. They sleep on, there's mats on the floor.
And toilets or showers?
I don't believe they have.
No, there's no showers.
There's bathrooms.
Yes, there is a shower, but they're typically not used frequently unless somebody has an accident and they need to take a shower. So it's not an open shower. They do have restrooms, and then they have what's called a quiet room for individuals that become behavioral issues. They're automatically placed in the quiet room, and anybody that's placed in the quiet room, Anchorage police department is called and they're transported over to non-criminal jail. That doesn't happen very often, but it does happen periodically.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I also see that there's some questions from audience members, and I just want to remind the audience that there'll be public participation at the end of the meeting. All right. Anything else? All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Burke. Can we get that cord over here? Thank you. No, this is switching. Yeah. All right, thank you. Where did this one go? Okay, cool. All right. Thank you, Ms. Burke, for that presentation. We're going to go ahead and move on in our agenda to a review of 2019 budget proposals. So based on the extensive discussion that we've had over the last few months regarding camp abatement, and then over the last few years regarding some holes in our system, I've asked the administration to come up with some different numbers and funding scenarios, and I will be presenting an overview of that to the committee today, and we will continue this discussion through the budget process. So this committee will not be finalizing or making any formal recommendations on to the budget process, but we're just reviewing it today, and we will go through this in the normal course of events as we work through the budget. So first start off with the current proposal by the administration of $500,000. This is in our budget for the Parks and Recreation cleanup crew, leaving at the current size of the crew. With the second is that MIT, the Mobile Intervention Team, staying at the 5-day level, and then funding for camp cleanup coordination. That's a critical component. Would you like to add anything, Ms. Burke, to that? Okay. So this is what's currently being proposed. It does leave one critical piece out, which gets us to the second funding level, which is status quo funding, and that increases funding for overflow shelter, puts funding in the budget. This program needs to be reauthorized. The program ends in 2019, and the funding for that is not currently in the budget. So this would, again, leave us at status quo. The next level is increased funding for 2019, responding to some of the concerns we've heard and discussed over the last many months. So additional indoor storage, overflow shelter, again, Parks and Recreation crew, not increasing the size of the crew, but increasing the period for which they are funded for. That was criticisms that we've received. Moving the mobile intervention team up from 5 days per week to 6 days per week, and then increasing the staffing capacity for the camp cleanup coordination.
That's just a point there. Is this cumulative? So this is 1.25 plus the 725,000 plus 500?
No, this is all different levels. So this, yeah, so the 725 is for that, that's for that, right. Then looking at future needs and how we can continue to build up the system as a whole, some future ideas for 2020 includes diversion funding for rapid housing and temporary assistance, setting up a fund very similar to what the Juneau assembly set up. Then creating additional indoor storage and staffing capacity, overflow shelter, again, critical. The important distinction here is that the Park and Recreation Cleanup Crew, the funding in this 2020 will double the size of the current crew and continue to fund it for a longer period of time. This funding level also assumes that the mobile intervention team will be funded for 7 days a week, and it adds even more staffing capacity for the camp cleanup coordination. Now, these are all ideas that deal with the system as a whole, from the camp abatement to making sure that we provide temporary assistance so people don't fall into homelessness. But these aren't all of the ideas. There were some other items that weren't included, such as transportation. And there was an article in the news earlier in the month about how, as the headline reads, how healthcare taxis and training helped cut the number of emergency calls around the Anchorage homeless shelter. The municipality does not fund in that arena, as well as behavioral health professional within DHHS. As we know, those institutions have been falling apart recently. So, if Mr. Trainee here, I'm sure he would have raised his hand up during the first slide of this presentation to talk about how you're going to fund all of this. So here are ideas that I've heard from my colleagues. So within the constraints of our budget, which means that we have to find places to cut. The second is the idea has been brought up by Mr. Constant of some type of bonding mechanism. And then the third is some type of tax increase. Like, for example, alcohol. We don't tax alcohol. What would it look like if we did tax them to fund some of these very needed services? So that is it. I'll open it up to any questions. Mr. Weddleton.
So I guess the question is, do we do, so $2 million is what we need, $2 million a year to do it right? Right, is that, or is it cumulative to the other? So are we looking at $3.25 million?
No. So the funding is projecting continuing to build up the system. 2019 was 1.25, and then 2020 getting to that 2 million.
So a question for the professionals is this our new reality where we will have this onslaught of homeless forever and we'll be doing this, or is it, it ebbs and flows and we're at a peak and we'll solve some of the early problems so it'll all lower? We've heard somewhere there was a report that said there's a decrease in childhood trauma is what we're dealing with to some extent now. People in the woods have horrible upbringing and trauma, so they can't function well and they end up in the woods. But if we solve that, then it will diminish, right? So is this a 10-year time we'll see this diminishing and then we can get back to not spending this much, or is this forever?
I won't say, there are probably many different opinions about that and voices, but I do think that other communities have spoken about economics, and so what happens on the economics of the state budget is a critical factor for Anchorage, and how we bolster ourselves against ebb and flow of the state budget is an important conversation piece. I think that issues around addiction, we've seen an uptick in opioid addiction, and that impacts these services. And what I think is I've in my career of working in this field since 2002, I've never seen the municipality put in place structures that can bolster against those changes and impacts from other factors, and that you probably are wise to think about investments that protect the open spaces and parks and the people who are homeless or vulnerable. But that may look different. It may look more like rapid rehousing resources for years when something happens with apartment units, or it may look like camp abatement for years when there is more camps. But there needs to be a fund, there needs to be a line that can be drawn upon to respond more quickly than ramping up the system that we've been doing.
Thanks, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. All right, so doesn't appear that there are any other questions. I know those are, oh, never mind, Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was digesting the numbers and the scenarios, and just given your work with this, where do you think we'll land? I mean, clearly the 500K that's proposed right now presumably will be funded, and to get to the status quo, even to maintain it flat, we have to cut from some other areas, and then to increase it further, as we just talked about, we either need more revenue or need to make cuts. Do you see any potential for getting at least to status quo?
I think we, as a body, speaking as the chair of this committee, as one of 11, I think we do definitely have the moral imperative to fund our overflow shelter needs. I think that's critical if we're going to even scratch the surface of some of the concerns that we've heard around camp abatement. I also think that it's time as a city that we begin to really seriously look at how we structure, how we fund these issues, and that we pony up as a city. And I think we can do that a variety of ways, and I think it's really critical, and I think we've heard people say, tax us, tax us. And I think one easy way to do that, and I always say easy, but it's going to be a political fight, is to see if there's a particular industry that can assist with this. And so I'll state it once and I'll state it again. These things could look like big numbers, but could be funded and resourced through an alcohol tax. All right, so as I stated before, this is going to be going through the normal budget process. We are voting on the budget November 20th. The next public hearing on the budget is on November 7th. And then after that, we'll have a meeting on budget amendments. So if you have any sway one way or the other, or thoughts about how we should fund this and our priorities, feel free either at the November 7th meeting or via email to reach out to the assembly. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to audience participation. I want to highlight a couple things though before I do that. So first is there is a memo regarding specifically the 12 policy points that were presented to us, and I outlined in very brief detail where we would be moving each of those. And so I definitely want to thank the community members for coming forward on that, and we'll continue to move forward on those points. Second, as we move forward with audience participation, I just want to remind everyone that we should remain respectful in this debate. I understand it's emotional, and that we should focus on policy, ideas, and solutions, and not on personalities. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for anyone who would like to participate in audience participation. I think we have a mic open. Yes, Mr. Webb, I think we have a mic. Okay.
First, I wanted to clarify a bit of the law related to Title 47. Title 47 of Alaska statutes has essentially two provisions. One provision dealing with those persons who are incapacitated by alcohol. Those folks are the ones who are going to the service, being picked up and taken to the service system. They are incapacitated. They are not necessarily a threat to themselves or others. Incapacitation is the key. The other piece of it relates to the folks who have a mental illness, whose mental illness leads them to behaviors that present a danger to themselves and others. of such an immediate nature that intervention must occur. Those are the folks who are supposed to be going to API, some of whom are now going to jail, but in any case. A couple of things. As you consider budget funding for the next few years, a key thing on all of these funding scenarios and our existing system, there is no performance standards or performance measures, either for the system that we currently operate with municipal staff or for any of the proposals. So that is a critical thing. My own suggestion for all of you is there are three things that we really need to address illegal encampments, in addition to all the housing and other interventions needed for folks who are truly homeless. Those things are a year-round system for camp identification, posting, abatement, and cleanup. We cannot allow a hiatus to occur during the winter, during which we accumulate hundreds of tons of waste and garbage, sewage, and other things that present health and safety risks to all of the citizens in our community, including those camping illegally. 2, we need adequate shelter beds to enable swift abatement. Among those things are immediate year-round cold weather shelter expansion, absolutely necessary, and an ongoing assessment and development of sufficient shelter beds to deal, real shelter beds to deal with the need to enable us to have swift abatement of encampment. 3, we need impact reduction actions to reduce the public health and safety threats to our community pending the camp abatements. So until we are actually abating camps fast enough, we need to intervene so that there is no human waste. There is no massive accumulation of garbage. I believe personally those things can best be accomplished through a private contract for the entire system operation. We currently, as a public policy matter, have elected to make camp posting and abatement a matter of police intervention. That is not a necessary thing, and it flies in the face of the policy that says we want to decriminalize homelessness. It also hides the information because you cannot get information about the police activities. They conclude that those are criminal investigations and the information is confidential and unavailable to the public. So we are doing things in the most expensive possible way, flying in the face of our own policies and hiding the information from the public while we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Ms. Andre.
My name is Judith Andrick, and I'm from the Homeless Committee for the Campbell Park Community Council, and I really support what Russ just said. I've been coming to these meetings since you all first started, and I appreciate everything that you've done to help the homeless, and I get really excited when I see the kinds of programs that have been explored and are coming to fruition. But not until June, when I saw the 12-point plan that had been done by private citizens, did I hear any real discussion about health and safety issues related to the encampments and what could be done to solve those problems. In the past 2 weeks, Campbell Park Trail is beginning to look like Chester Creek, Rogers Park, where all the camps are along the trail. I've always known that we have camps in our area because Far North Bicentennial has a huge camp that's way back in off the trail. But in the last 2 weeks, I think that all of the encampments that got shut down by the city and moved out, all moved to the Campbell Park Trail. There are numerous camps in brand new parts of the park right along the trail within spitting distance, dozens of them. There's now a big camp that's up, I've been told, between St. Mary's and Waldron Lake. They're all along the trail. They're brand new parts of the forest are now being deforested. Because of the timing of these new encampments, I suspect it has to do with all the encampments that have been shut down. What's the point of making camps shut down unless you have a place for people to go? we're not going to have any park rooms left unless the administration and the assembly set aside some place for all the homeless to go, not just the people that want to be housed, but the people that don't want to be housed. Whether you set up a camp management area, which I know getting shot down, but there's no point in there's not going to be a point in having any parks pretty soon. All these new areas, and when I called, I talked to Rosa, and I get told, well, they're probably there until next summer because of the hiatus and the shutdowns. These people live in the woods all year round, not just in the summertime. I appreciate everything that you're trying to do, but the health and safety part has to happen. I've been trying to get Campbell Creek and some of the other creeks checked. I've talked to state people, I've talked to city people, because I see there's a great little creek where the kids all play at Lake Otis. And I watch the little kids in that water, and I know how bad that water is. And when I say to my friends, if you let your kids play in that creek, at least make sure you clean them up good and don't let them put their hands in their mouth. And they say, why? And I tell them about the camps that are upstream that are polluting. And I said, I have not been able to get anybody to do a fecal occult sample, but it needs to happen. And these parents are horrified. Even if you posted the streams so parents would think about what's in that water their little kids are playing in. My friends have been horrified when I brought this up. But shutting down camps and abating them without knowing exactly where you're having all these people go, even if they don't want to go to one of our new housing projects, they're just moving into other parts of the woods. And we're not going to have much left in the way of parks pretty soon if this keeps up. I appreciate everything you're doing. I think all this is really exciting. I've always loved hearing about all the new projects that are going on for the homeless. But health and safety is for everybody. It's for the homed and the homeless. It's for the young and the old. It's for the residents and the tourists. It's for the rich and the poor. And right now, health and safety are huge issues that aren't being addressed. Not sufficiently. Thank you.
Sure. Ms. Davis.
So Mr. Rivera put up some possibilities of how we would fund that. I disagree, or I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I'm just curious how you think
Alcohol
we
taxes.
should pay for it. Okay, thank you.
Ernie Hall put that in. It didn't go anywhere. It needs to go. I am willing to help pay for this. I think it has to happen. This is my town, and it's being destroyed because I'm getting, people are getting tax breaks. Somebody has to pay for it. It'll have to be us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Yes, Ms. Rhodes.
My friend Judith, thank you. I would like to think that the camps that are over in your neighborhood are because of the displacement of the camps in Chester Creek, but I have to disabuse you of that notion, my friend, because the camps in Chester Creek are now back. They actually are looking just about the same as they did before, except they haven't yet amassed to the sizes that they were before due to the fact that they overwintered there. So allowing these camps to overwinter is only going to do exactly what Russ said. It's going to create more trouble and going to cost more to clean up, and it's going to cause more public health issues for our city. And Ms. Andrigue said it really, really nicely, really euphemistically. What she's talking about is the dumping of honey buckets day in and day out into our streams. That's what we're talking about. We see it. And that's where our children are playing. So that's the first point. There has to be year-round abatements, absolutely. Secondly, this is the first time I've heard about any proposal to put any kind of a behavioral health expert or staff member or anything in DHSS in the Muni. That is a complete waste of your money. First of all the state services that come here are state services. We don't provide municipal behavioral health services. So there's nothing for that person to do unless you improve how much money the state is influxing into your service system here, or unless you wish to actually begin a service system and fund it of your own. I don't know what possible benefit that a person in DHSS who's a behavioral health expert of any kind could really benefit you. And I guess my final question is, my understanding is the trust is no longer paying for Nancy Burke's salary. Where is that going to come from? Is that in here someplace? Because I think that we just need to know. Thank you.
Sure, Ms. Davidson.
Same question. How do you think we should pay for it?
I have no objection to an alcohol tax. I'm sure there are other excise taxes that you could use. Vice taxes are the usual means of taking care of vice.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Excuse me. Sure.
My name's Tom McGrath. A couple of things. The reduction in the homeless is going to be 270 over the next 4 years, according to Nancy. So that still leaves in the summertime 750. I see a couple of people here at the table that I've seen for 40 years. John Welton, Sandy Trini, have been around for 40 years that we've been talking about this, and the numbers go up and go down. We haven't solved anything to a large extent. The performance measures, that Russ is talking about, you need a year-round system, adequate shelter beds. When I was in the military a long, long time ago, a private got 76 square feet. Think about that. Maybe we need a place where they can have 76 square feet. And we live fairly well with 76 square feet. Some people might argue with that, but I thought it was okay. We need to come up with a plan. And unfortunately, in the last 3 years, we've really been talking about this better and more than we've ever talked about it in the last 40 years. So maybe we're making progress. But I'll tell you, the 1.225 million, that kind of pisses me off. But I know we give the museum $5 million a year, or there was $5 million last year, maybe it's more this year. There's other places where we give a lot more money, and it's for people that can really afford to pay. If I want to go to the museum, I'll pay the ticket. And there's a lot of free days, but there's people at the museum making almost $300,000 a year with overhead. Come on, guys. Pick your priorities. This affects every single person in Anchorage. I think there's solutions. I know there's solutions, but we also have to say our priority is people going to the museum rather than people that are out in the streams. And and I think there's solutions for that too. Porta potties, ways that they can manage their trash, and and you need to listen to the people that are affected, the homeless. Saturday night at the Awake Shelter or the Awake Banquet, there's a lady that was homeless. She is now not homeless because of Awake, and she explained to us it was a full-time job just to have something to eat and decide where she was going to sleep at night. And if you're homeless, that's about what you got. And then hopefully, like her, there's a solution at the end. But if we aren't going to find solutions, just moving them on, closing down camps, that doesn't really solve anything. Because there's still, right now, 1,000 people that are looking for a place to put their head down tonight. And only certain numbers will fit in the shelters. If we're going to reduce that by 270 in the next 4 years, we haven't made a whole lot of progress. So I think you're way underfunding, and you need to look at the budget and say, okay, we're giving $5 million to the museum in a year. And the budget under Lance Wilbur, that $10 million, that's always there that nobody really knows what it's for. Look at those line items. $5 million is a museum. There's 5 more other million that goes to little fancy projects around town. Performing Arts Center. They get money every year. When people are, got their finery on and are paying $70 for a ticket, maybe they need to spend $75. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to? Sure, go ahead, sir.
I am agree with a lot of what's being said here by the public input, and just want to add that I am concerned. I don't agree with some things that the committee is coming up with, and I think they are still missing a few points. I am concerned about the lack of compassion for the community, for the civilized people that are responsible, and that the homes are really anchored to, that you supposedly are anchoring your homes to. People feel threatened, and so there are two general responses when people feel threatened: is fight or flight. And so the way people fight is to attend these meetings. And if we don't get anything done here, then the next step is to fight. And that's almost where I'm at. When people start fleeing the situation, you're going to lose your tax base, and you're going to have some serious deterioration. It's just going to get worse. I think you're leading us today into a false sense of success with your program, and I think that's really what the goal is, to show success, and it may not really be there. Thank you.
Thank you. No. Sir, could you give your name for the record, please?
Jim Morris.
Thank you. And then I think I have a question from Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Hi, Mr. Morris. I appreciate your feedback and all of your feedback. I think a lot of us use the trails and are familiar with what you're experiencing and feel for people who live that day in and day out. But I think what we're here to do today is try to brainstorm about how to move from beyond that. So specific suggestions, specifically on the budget, would be really helpful for many of the speakers. Thanks.
That's not why I'm here today.
Am I good to go, Felix?
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Leva.
Ron Oliva. I own Grubstake Auction next to the shelter in Beans. I was at the budget hearing last night. Make sure you go and do some input. My input was what Judge Rhodes said about parks and rec, that the homeless are stealing because that budget goes to clean up. So she called it a taking. How would you like to be next to the shelter in a soup kitchen and try to operate a business when you're just getting it along the bike paths? How would you like to get it along your fence lines and on your property? Not in NIMBY, not in my backyard, in the middle of your property. And I have to tell you that I also suggested how to get the money. Don't take it from Parks and Recs. There's a free ride for the churches and the nonprofits in this city, and they reviewed the real estate. We provide fire, police, roads. Hey, we don't want to get in a conflict on education, but they got to kind of ante up, especially if they're paying the executive salaries of $150,000 to $200,000. I think they have some money to give to this homeless project. And specifically in Fairview, Bishop's Attic takes out $300,000 profit a year. They've taken out almost $12 million in the last 20 years. And the blessing was 2 homeless people burned down the old building. So they got a new building and haven't paid any tax. So I'm real concerned about that. I'm also concerned and somewhat worried about selling my property to the city. I'm in the process of trying to do that because it's adjacent to the shelter, and I'm fleeing. I'm fleeing with my life, my health, my staff, and my clients. It's no longer doable to stay in that location. And you can ask any contractor, just recently the contractor that put in the sewer line, what he observed. And he told me he went from compassion to, unfortunately, AK-15 and take him out. It's a terrible situation down there. And Cuddy Park, they no longer feed the geese. The coliform went from 10,000 down to 1,000. Still very toxic. And of course, I have 3 outstanding misdemeanors. Allegedly disinfectant was put down on an open sewer. There was fecal material, blood, used condoms, Tampexes, vomit, and decaying food. And if you worry about the kids stepping in the pond, worry about that back door that's open to kids' kitchen and having volunteers walk through what I see every day. So that's a real concern. And if it's not a concern, then I think the assembly should be official taste testers for kids' kitchen and feed it to their children first. And then if nothing happens, we'll feed it to the poor children. So I can
go ahead and wrap it up, Mr.
I can wrap it up by giving you the data on my lawsuit. My lawsuit, when I sued him for loss of health, safety, economic interference, and quiet enjoyment, it was $30,000, and I offered it back to the city for commercial garbage pickup, a security guard, and a medic.
One more sentence, Mr. Oliva.
Buy my property.
Thank you. Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Rivera, thank you. Members of the committee. I'm Nick Begich, and I had come a couple of months ago and made a suggestion to this committee for funding this, and I suggested alcohol. When I look at the municipal budget, I think we get 20 million or more from cigarettes. No one's getting run over by a carton of cigarettes. We had 3.5 million from marijuana. We get zero for alcohol. Where are they? There's the alcohol industry in this meeting today. They're not here. They've done everything they can to influence policymakers of state to avoid alcohol taxes. And the real cost, national statistics, $2.05 a drink is what it costs society. Our society is, we don't have parks anymore where our kids can go safely. So tax alcohol. Lift the property tax, put it on the ballot, let the public decide to tax alcohol. And I think this community is ready to tax alcohol, make the alcohol industry responsible for some of the mess that we're all living with. And it's simple. It's taxed at a fair level that matches some of the other vices. At least match cigarettes, for God's sake. 21 million, 10 times more than what's in this budget, Mr. Whittleton, relative to homeless. Does it need to be ongoing? Yeah, because homelessness is ongoing. It's not going. But leaving people in the street isn't the answer either. When I came before, I mentioned that Alaska has 900 beds empty in the correctional facility in the valley. It's still empty. Costs $8 million a year for the city to maintain it. Empty. More than 76 square feet, I'm sure. Everything down to the sheets. And we can't figure out how to make it work. $500 million in cash resources available to the Mental Health Trust, which you're reading about in the paper, still can't do the job since 1956 when they got 1 million acres of land and a trust to fund mental health issues. I asked some of my friends in the business community, I asked Dave Cuddy once, David, since 1956, if you had 1 million acres, could you have solved this problem? The answer is absolutely yes. But this gentleman suggested in the private sector, perhaps that's where it needs to be handled. But fund it, put it to the voters, raise the tax cap sufficiently enough, let the voters decide how we want to clean up our mess, and have the political courage to get it on the ballot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no one else, I just wanted to answer one of the questions that came up in public testimony regarding Ms. Burke's position. Nancy is funded through June of next year, and the administration is working on funding to complete the remainder of the year. And it's come to my attention that that was part of the original agreement with the trust, and that the administration is going to work within that framework. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and close this meeting.